Hello everyone, thanks for joining me at BrickCon for Lego for Big Kids, the road to 18 plus. As Jeannie says, my name is Graham Hancock. I'm the editor at brickfanatics.com and the deputy editor at Blocks magazine. And I hope everyone's been enjoying BrickCon so far. So as everyone likely knows, this year saw the Lego Group declare adults welcome. And I'm sure like me, most of you aren't too fussed about what the age label is on the box. As long as it's a decent Lego set, it doesn't matter what the age marking is. And in some cases, the age has just been changed. So like with creator expert sets such as the Elf Clubhouse. But some of the other sets are clearly trying something new and they're looking to appeal to the kind of people who aren't fully converted AFOLs yet, like Lego Art. But for me, and I imagine many of you, a lot of what we're seeing under the 18 plus range is familiar. Over the years, there have been different experiments to cater to adults, some that worked, some that didn't, but a lot of them seem to have informed what is going on today. So I'm going to talk about how the Lego Group evolved the company's offering to adults, how it went from a few hobby sets, a few statues, a few experiments here and there, to this year's big statement with black boxes and an 18 plus label. There'll be time for questions at the end, and I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on which of these adult offerings worked, which didn't, and perhaps we can speculate a bit on where this can go in the future. So this year, the Lego Group declared adults welcome. According to the company's research, the number of adults buying sets for themselves has increased by 400% over the past year. And now they want to grow that number even more. But while the news might have made a big splash this year, it isn't the first time that the Lego Group has gone after the adult consumer, or at least made steps towards those of us who never grew out of Lego. Many of these sets from years past have clear, and sometimes less clear, connections to new sets that are being released today. So the first time that we can see the Lego Group starting to notice that more detailed models are of interest is back in 1976 with the hobby sets. So 391 1920 Renault, 390 1913 Cadillac, and 392 Formula One were the first sets that offered more detailed models than were typical in the Lego range. Now these sets are of course crude by today's standards, but if you look at them alongside regular sets from the 1970s, they're using more intricate techniques and they're even making clever use of some of the pieces that were available at the time. I should stress that these are 9 plus sets. They're targeted at people half the age of adults, but it's easy to see how these were the first sets that were intended more to be models that might appeal to an older consumer rather than toys. Trains should also get a mention here because around 1974, the train sets are looking a lot better and less blocky. If you go back to 1966, a set like 113 motorized train set is way too boxy to appeal to adults. But then when you get to sets like 725 Freight Train and 182 train set with motor, they're actually starting to look a lot more like real trains. The reason trains are important because they're another way for Lego to become a hobby. Model trains is an early example of adults playing with toys and getting deeply immersed in it. Kids can't afford to buy meters and meters of track with their pocket money. They don't have space for huge layouts. There's also that barrier to entry with trains that a certain knowledge of how the system works is required. All of that makes trains a key entry point for adults getting into the Lego world because it's taking an existing hobby segment and applying the Lego touch to it. I'm not going to get too far into technique here because that would be an entire other presentation, but it would be really remiss not to mention it. It launched in 1977 as a way to offer consumers something more sophisticated than the typical system, something a bit more engineering influenced, so children aging out of Lego might hang around. It's abundantly clear with how big and impressive the sets became that adults find a lot to love in Lego Technic and have for years. As time went on, that became more and more embraced, with the theme catering not just to older children, but more and more so also to adults. Then obviously 1978 was the year that saw the introduction of the minifigure, and the Lego Group confidently built up the portfolio of system sets featuring the characters while expanding Technic and Duplo. It was all very much focused at the time on capturing children in those different age brackets. One thing that Lego emphasised over and over again is that the mission is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. And during the late 1970s and early 1980s, it was all about that core audience. While the LEGO Group spent that time successfully targeting children and massively growing the company's market, by 1986 there was a willingness to start looking towards adults again. 5580 Highway Rig, 5540 Formula One Racer, and 5510 Off-Road 4x4 left out the minifigures and focused on detailed models. Throughout the 1990s, a new set was released in the model team theme each year. Again, the age marking didn't indicate that these were for adults, but things were clearly moving, very slowly, in that direction. 5541 Blue Fury is such a beloved set from the theme that a mini one was released this year as a Lego.com gift with purchase set. And while the techniques have changed, the parts portfolio has evolved, it's clear to see that there's plenty of influence from Model Team in the Creator Expert vehicles that have been released over the past 10 years or so. Those Model Team sets gradually got bigger, with 5571 Giant Truck offering what was, at the time, a massive 1,757 pieces. A big boost for adult LEGO fans came along in 1999. For many, many fans, LEGO Star Wars brought them out of their dark age, thanks to the wish fulfillment of LEGO and Star Wars coming together. The early years of the theme had quite a lot of experimentation with Technic sets, mini sets, Mindstorms, and in 2000, the introduction of the Ultimate Collector series. 7191 X-Wing Fighter and 7181 TIE Interceptor were unashamedly about being models rather than toys, not built at minifigure scale and not including any minifigures. It was Henrik Anderson, who had been working on Model Team, who came over to Star Wars to design those two sets. They kicked off the UCS series that has been running for 20 years now. And interestingly, the age marking was up to 14 plus for those first two sets. And in one of the catalogues at the time, they were described as a challenge to all grown-ups. 2000 is the first year where LEGO products were clearly aimed at adults. In addition to those UCS sets, two big sculpture sets are also made available. 3450 Statue of Liberty and 3723 LEGO minifigure offered something entirely new. They were almost like something that would be seen at Legoland, albeit on a smaller scale, rather than typical LEGO minifigure scale models. And those carried on with 3724 LEGO Dragon, and the concept was even incorporated into Star Wars with 10018 Darth Maul and 7194 Yoda. It's debatable exactly why those sets didn't take off in a bigger way. One potential reason is that they weren't close enough to what fans wanted at the time. Another reason is that the internet was not as widely used back then, and online shopping was certainly not the norm. During an interview, LEGO Group owner Kurt Christensen talks about the way the internet was a complete game changer, changing how fans come together, how the company interacts with fans, and how LEGO sells products that cater for them. He said, "The way the fan communities have grown, it's unbelievable. We cannot underestimate what this has meant for us over the years. I often thought there must be a hobby segment out there, but it was so hard to first of all create specific sets for the community of AFOLs, but also we didn't know how to reach them." Tentative steps were being taken to work with the fan community, as Daniel Siskin was approached to design 3739 Blacksmith Shop. It's the sort of thing that fans always like to see in LEGO Castle, but to appeal to children, the theme tended to focus more on the conflict aspects rather than everyday lifetime models. So before LEGO Factory, before LEGO Ideas, this was the first time that a fan designed an official LEGO set. 3739 was able to come about because LEGO was attempting to implement a turnaround strategy so that the company would survive its financial crisis. A key facet of that was listening to the fans and consumers, having an open dialogue rather than being insular. It was only because of that shift in thinking that targeted sets really started to be what adults wanted. Model airplanes were an area the LEGO Group explored, with a few sets starting in 2001, with 3451 Sopwith Camel, which was followed by 10024 Red Baron, and 10124 Wright Flyer. Again, they're a good example of something that were unlikely to appeal to children, but fit in with that idea of adult hobbyists. Model airplanes, like model trains, are well known for attracting hardcore enthusiasts, and the fact that these were released for 3 consecutive years suggests they worked out pretty well. Another hobby side of the LEGO range was getting attention around this time, with LEGO train fans attending a summit to discuss what products would appeal to AFOLs and what might work as direct-to-consumer products. This input fed into sets like 10020 Santa Fe Super Chef, with that model released alongside separate engines and cars, allowing fans to order separate trains and carriages to create their own configurations. While LEGO art is definitely something different, it is not the first time that the LEGO group has given fans something along these lines. Fans could upload a picture of themselves to the LEGO website, and it would be produced as a custom mosaic set, which used only white, grey and black bricks. Alternative pre-designed versions could be selected, with options including a dinosaur, a tiger, a cat and Johnny Thunder. Back then, the mosaic theme was age marked 10 plus rather than 18 plus, and clearly it was a much simpler version of what we have today, although the piece count was still massive. The ideas that went into both LEGO Art and the LEGO Store's Mosaic Maker are clearly there with this product theme. In an interview during the open of the LEGO Store in Leicester Square, Martin Uratia, head of the LEGO Global Retail Innovation Team, explained, "We used to do mosaics around 20 years ago with different technology. You used to send off for it by mail to Denmark, and then by hand it would be converted into a mosaic. Then it needed to go to the warehouse, the bricks were selected by hand, put in a box and shipped to you. It was because of that time and labour intensive process that it didn't work out that time around." I'm just touching on these because they showed a continued commitment to bigger adult models. 10152 Maersk Sealand container ship and 65537 classic freight train were both released in 2004. Then in 2005, 10143 Death Star 2 was released in the Star Wars theme. It was the largest and most expensive LEGO set to date, with 3,441 pieces. There's no doubt that LEGO is pushing the size of the sets at this time, seeing how big and how detailed they can go. 10143 featured a 16 plus age marking, showing that LEGO was finally acknowledging openly that some of the sets really are for adults. LEGO Factory was launched in 2005 as a way for fans to design their own sets digitally and then order them as physical products. The process involved making the model in LDD, then purchasing it via LEGO Shop at Home. Fans would get a special box with an image of the mock printed on the front, containing the model that they had designed. To promote LEGO Factory, a contest was held for fans to enter, with 3 winning entries released as official sets under the theme. Again, these were marked for 8+, but given they were based on fan mocks, clearly pointed them towards adult collectors. The website and theme continued for a few years and seems to have paved the way for LEGO ideas. In 2006, 10177 Boeing 787 Dreamliner is an interesting one, simply because it seeks to really follow what is being done in the Star Wars UCS theme, incorporating a display stand and offering another model airplane. But then offering something very different at the same time, 10173 Holiday Train, showing that LEGO had finally noticed that fans saw a real strong connection between LEGO and Christmas, with many of us having grown up unwrapping boxes of bricks every year. It was a precursor to the Winter Village sets that have become an annual tradition now. A model style set even crept into the LEGO Batman theme that year, with 7784 borrowing the Ultimate Collector branding for a Batman display piece. Thinking about what we had last year, with 76139 1989 Batmobile and 76023 the Tumbler before that, this is an early attempt to offer a Batmobile that's more about display than play. It might not have been stated as overtly as it was this year, but 2007 was the year that the LEGO Group really started to be bold about the fact that some of these toys are for adults. These sets had 16 plus age markings, no longer fudging that these were aimed at fully grown humans rather than children or teenagers. 10179 Ultimate Collector's Millennium Falcon was the biggest ever LEGO set at the time, and to retail a product for $500 was a big deal. Now we're used to paying several $100s for LEGO sets, but back then it was unusual rather than the norm for a set to cost that much. To push people to buy it early, the first run of sets had a first edition label on the box, and a certificate of authenticity inside. But what made the BMF different to other UCS sets was not just its price and piece count, but that it was to scale with minifigures, and 4 minifigures could finally fit in the Falcon's cockpit. After all of those sculpture and model-based sets, the LEGO Group was realising that adults love minifigures too. And that was even more apparent in Café Corner. The first ever modular building was like a revelation. Buildings in LEGO sets for children tended to be a bit too simplified. Fans wanted something more detailed and in scale with the minifigures, and this is what the first ever modular building set delivered. Jamie Berard started working on it in 2006, shortly after he joined the LEGO Group. Speaking to Brick Journal when the set launched, he explained that Jan Byatt and Steve Witt had polled the AFOL community and determined that fans really wanted houses and buildings, and lots of them. The set even included classic LEGO smiley faces, 2 dots for eyes and a smile. It really was something adults had been hoping for, and the set worked as another series that would tempt new adults out of their dark ages. Released under the LEGO Factory theme, 10183 Hobby Trains was intended to spark the LEGO train community to get involved with designing their own trains and layouts and share them on the LEGO Factory platform. Paul Smith-Meyer and Tormod Askildsen reached out to some of the world's best LEGO train builders and asked them to get involved with coming up with multiple trains that could be built with 1 box of bricks. As with the blacksmith shop, these early examples of co-creation, when the fans are genuinely brought into the product selection and development process, paved the way for getting fans involved in a bigger way with the LEGO Ideas platform. Picking up where Statue of Liberty had left off 7 years earlier, 10181 Eiffel Tower was the first of the landmark sets that recreate iconic buildings from around the world. These sets took advantage of the massive piece counts that were now available and offered a nice counterbalance to the modular building sets. The next year saw the release of 10189 Taj Mahal, which was the largest ever set at the time, using almost 6,000 pieces. In 2008, another new theme for adults launched, and it is the first time that LEGO used sleek black boxes to demonstrate who they were for. Adam Reed Tucker collaborated with Paul Smith-Meyer, who was working within LEGO on new concepts for products that were not typical sets for children, to launch architecture with a few trial sets. When it proved to be a hit, it became a regular theme and has continued to release sets every year since. Rather than going big like the modular series, architecture sets kept things relatively small, using microscale to provide a desk-sized replica of a building or skyline. It was intended to appeal to adults who weren't collecting LEGO as much, rather than those who were already AFOLs. The black boxes and minimalist artwork has clearly worked for architecture, as we're seeing it come over to the rest of the 18+ sets. The adults needed some smaller sets has also carried over to the new helmet models that we've seen this year. 10188 Death Star is the first model outside the modular buildings that could really be described as a playset for adults. Rather than being a detailed model like the typical UCS sets, it was like a child's dream Death Star playset, but at a size and price for adults. It included a mind-blowing 24 minifigures. That same year, 10184 Town Plan was launched to celebrate 50 years of the LEGO brick and inspired by classic town plan sets. While it could be enjoyed by both children and adults, the nostalgic box and retro style was clearly intended to appeal to the old folk. The very next year, 2009, saw the release of 10193 Medieval Market Village and 10199 Winter Village Toy Shop. What these models show is that the LEGO Group had fully accepted that adults did not only want detailed models, they wanted sets aimed at them featuring minifigures. They were going beyond real-world modular buildings and branching into classic themes like castle. 10187 Volkswagen Beetle brought back the idea of scale model cars, but in a more detailed and sophisticated way than Model Team had done years before. 10220 Volkswagen T1 campervan was released a few years later and took things to the next level with a smoother finish and fewer visible studs, setting the standard that would be followed by Creator Expert. 10186 General Grievous is a bit of an interesting experiment, a set that came a bit out of the blue in 2008. It's a mix of Technic and regular system building, and it's a different spin on a character statue. The Darth Maul and Yoda statues had already done Star Wars characters as models, but this time it wasn't just a case of basic brick building, and it feels like this General Grievous has influenced 43179 Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse that was released in the Disney theme this year. Another regular series that is now part of the 18 plus theme are the Fairground sets. In 2009, 10196 Grand Carousel seemed like a one-off, but then it sparked an entire run of fairground rides in scale with minifigures. 10194 Emerald Knight is just a quick one to mention that was released in 2009, as it's a reminder that every now and again, LEGO would throw a train set to the adult fans. In 2008, LEGO partnered with a company in Japan to trial Kuso, which became LEGO Ideas. Fans could submit a mock, and at the time had to gather 1,000 votes before the LEGO group would review it. The first set to be submitted by a fan and then adapted to become an official model in 2010 was 21100 Shinkai 6500 Submarine. Back then it was all an experiment, testing the waters to see whether this would work. Now it's become a big platform and theme that regularly attracts worldwide media attention. While a few of the sets are a bit more child-friendly, the majority of the idea sets have been the sort of thing that adults would like, with the sets designed to a standard that is appropriate for AFOLs. It's probably the most varied LEGO theme, with the sets often being closer to the type of things that adults build as mocks than you find in other themes. There's also sets that came out as part of LEGO Ideas that you wouldn't normally expect to be released as toys, such as the Big Bang Theory and Friends. With Architecture, Ideas and Creator Expert offering regular sets for adults, things were ticking along nicely with a few sets each year. Occasionally, a theme would get a one-off adult set, like 10210 Imperial Flagship or 10217 Diagon Alley, but these would generally be minifigure scale sets. Basically, everything had fallen into a nice rhythm that fans were getting used to. Something a bit different cropped up in 2013 with 21050 Architecture Studio. It was a clear adult set, but it was focused entirely on creativity. A spin-off from the architecture theme, it contained white and transparent bricks only and included a guide with techniques and suggestions. The idea was that those with an interest in architecture could try putting their own buildings together, and it's another example of when LEGO has sought to appeal to adults who are not already AFOLs. 71006 The Simpsons House is an interesting set that turned up in 2014, because up until then the LEGO group had focused on big, action-packed, epic licenses. Going to an animated comedy was something different, presumably again going after a different adult audience, and that set was followed up by the Quickie Mart the following year. Three interesting sets from 2015 and 2016 just to touch on. LEGO Ninjago gets Epic with 70751 Temple of Air Jitsu. Disney gets its first massive set with 71040 Disney Castle. And 76052 Batman Classic TV series Batcave is a real departure for that theme. These show LEGO pushing adult sets in many directions, continuing to go beyond Creator Expert, Star Wars, architecture and ideas. A bigger experiment though was 75827 Firehouse Headquarters, as it took on the Ghostbusters license, one that is steeped in nostalgia and not one that had been well covered by LEGO at the time. And the set was 4,634 pieces. For a film that LEGO had barely covered, to get such a large set was really strange, but obviously it delighted fans of the movie. Two sets in 2017 indicated that LEGO are aware of what is going on in the secondary market, with the brand new 75192 Millennium Falcon and re-release 10256 Taj Mahal. Both of the original versions of the models have become unaffordable on the aftermarket, and given that it had been a decade since they launched, new fans needed a chance to get hold of them. Since then, there hasn't been any glut of re-releases. They have been used very sparingly. The launch event for the 75192 Falcon showed how much adults could be relied on for hype and excitement, as hundreds of fans queued at midnight in London to be the first to own one, with the $800 set selling out immediately. If ever the LEGO Group doubted how much fans would pay for a set, that one probably settled it once and for all. One of the interesting things about the 18+ label is that there is finally an acknowledgement that some sets aren't really for children. I interviewed the super talented LEGO designers Chris Stamp and Nicholas Vass about 7062 Ninjago City for Blocks magazine, and I suggested that this just wasn't for kids. But Chris corrected me, and he said, just because it's a bigger product, it doesn't mean we need to neglect how a kid would handle it. Now, if you look at the set, it's enormous, detailed, beautiful, it's nearly 5,000 pieces, it's 16+. There's no way that it isn't intended for adults first. But it seems that at the time, everything has to keep in mind that children might want to try playing with it or handling it, even if it was predominantly for big kids. So the 18+ label might be shifting that mindset a little bit. It was a big deal when Harry Potter came back, but an even bigger deal for AFOLs when 71043 Hogwarts Castle arrived. It's by far the largest version of Hogwarts yet, at 6,020 pieces. It's also the largest LEGO Harry Potter set by far. Does everyone remember LEGO Former? Or don't worry if not, because neither does anyone else, even though it was only launched a couple of years ago. This was the first time it became apparent just how far the LEGO Group was moving to catering for adults. Former was basically building a Technic skeleton in a rough fish shape, then attaching coverings to it, hiding the LEGO inside, and resulting in an attractive fish or shark. It was launched on the crowdfunding platform Indiegogo, which meant that consumers had to pay for it up front months before it would be ready. What was really clear at the time was that this wasn't seeking to appeal to who LEGO deem AFOLs to be. It was looking to appeal to adults who saw LEGO as a toy and wanted something that was a little bit more sophisticated. At the time, Carrie Vinther, the senior marketing manager and head of creative PlayLab Pilot, said, LEGO Former is more of a creative project than a toy and more about display than play. The young adults we speak to tell us they still feel the urge to be creative and enjoy the physical experience of making stuff, but life seems to get in the way. For whatever reason, presumably relating to feedback about the product, Former wasn't continued past the pilot. It was always acknowledged, though, that it was part of a new strategy to take innovative new products to market more quickly, for LEGO to take risks and see what worked. 75810, The Upside Down, was a big deal when it launched last year, as the hit Netflix series Stranger Things has a huge fan base, and the model's gravity-defying upside-down house is really impressive. Given that certain franchises and properties have previously been deemed too adult for release as LEGO sets, with Stranger Things projects rejected on LEGO ideas, many fans were surprised that this was considered suitable for release. It seems likely that the conversation around Stranger Things contributed to the LEGO Group's decision to introduce the 18+ age marking. There's no chance of children mistakenly thinking Stranger Things, The Big Bang Theory or Seinfeld is for them if there's a big 18+ on it. And that brings us to 2020, which saw the big move to an 18+ age label, which I acknowledge is entirely symbolic, but it does tell us what LEGO is thinking and where the company might go with these adult sets. 10277 Crocodile Locomotive deserves a shout out, because trains have been such an on and off topic for LEGO sets. While there are always trains for children, adult train fans have been remembered at times and forgotten at others, so it's getting a dedicated train set worthy of being in an adult's collection is refreshing. Sports is an area where there is a huge potential market, but it has been relatively untapped by LEGO. 10272 Old Trafford, Manchester United, is a first set for passionate soccer fans. The micro-scale set is noteworthy because it is expanding beyond what is typically released for adults. Sports is an area that LEGO has said the company will look more at in the future. Another set doing something new is 43179 Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. The set is a pair of statues of Disney's most well-known characters, but built in a more sophisticated way than older models like the dragon, taking a bit of influence from that random 10186 General Grievous set from 2008. Could we see more statue sets again in the future? Then 71374 Nintendo Entertainment System comes along, looking like a fan build that we might see in an event like BrickCon. LEGO hasn't tended to opt for scale replicas of real-life objects before, but this NES has perfectly captured the shape of the actual console in a way that has really excited fans. With the Globe just announced as the next LEGO Ideas set, it seems that these real-life objects in LEGO are another area that we'll see explored more in the future. LEGO Art takes that concept from LEGO Mosaics and pairs it with popular designs and licenses, then layers on top of that audio to listen to while you build. It is convincingly moving it away from just a LEGO mosaic to more of an experience. For fans who like the satisfaction of seeing a three-dimensional model at the end, perhaps these sets don't offer much. But for the adult colouring book type market, those who want a relaxing activity, perhaps this is the perfect thing to fit the bill. And then the new LEGO Star Wars helmet seemed to show that LEGO has realised not every adult has the space, time or money for a huge UCS set, and those helmets cater for those fans. There's an Iron Man one too, suggesting that this can go into different themes and offer the kind of busts that we usually see from high-end collectible companies. And then there's also been a couple of sets that are throwbacks to classic LEGO from the 1990s. 21322 Pirates of Barracuda Bay and 10273 Haunted House referenced pirates and adventurers, bringing back classic characters and playing on the nostalgia strings of fans who grew up with the originals. So this year we've had minifigure scale sets, model vehicles and fairground rides as usual. But we've also had a sports set, more nostalgia sets, real world items, mosaic sets and helmet sets. This really has varied the portfolio more than we've seen before, although many of these concepts have their roots in sets that have been released in the past. 18 plus or LEGO for adults is not something that has started this year. It's been a gradual journey, and this is probably the next stage of it rather than a destination. It will be fascinating to see where it all goes next. With experiments like LEGO Art, more statue type models, replicas of real life objects, LEGO are clearly willing to try new things. Some of them will last for a few years, like model airplanes, some will last for a long time, like modular buildings, and some will come and go like Former. One thing that has cropped up several times in these adult products is bringing fans into the model design process. And with LEGO Ideas growing, both in terms of the size of the sets and the number released, that seems to be continuing in a really positive direction. It will be interesting to see what the future holds, but as long as LEGO keep the dialogue with fans open, we should get to see some really interesting new sets and have more choice than ever before. That wraps up my look back through LEGO sets for adults and how they've evolved through the years. If anyone has any questions, comments, or their own thoughts about LEGO sets for adults, then feel free to share them. I'd love to hear them. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Graham. That was awesome and very interesting and informative. I remember a lot of those old sets from my childhood.
It's nice to go down.
Do we have some questions from the audience here?
Yes, so the first question that we have from the audience, do you think the Elf Winter Village set should have been an 18 plus set?
My personal view on that one is no, because I don't know about you, but the way I think about Winter Village sets is them almost being like a family experience. Like, sure, I'm happy to sit and build one on my own, but you can picture it as it being a really good way to get parents and kids involved in building Lego together. And in my mind, if you put an 18 plus label on it, it implies that it's not really for that, that it is for, you know, the adult. But look at Elf Clubhouse, like, kids are going to adore that, right? It's, you know, just as much fun for them as grown-ups. What's your take on it?
This was asked by Dan Chefik. So I don't know if he wants to chime in with his thoughts on the matter.
I don't think it should have been. I think it definitely targets a younger audience, and I think they slapped 18 plus on it to make it feel luxe and go with the rest of the theme because it technically falls within creator expert. But I think they kind of like the ideas line. They should have just continued the Winter Village line as is rather than the black boxes.
Another question is, do you think Lego would get into ideas where they basically where they sell a set so large that it allows people to use pieces from their collections or buy pick-a-brick boxes? Sorry, it's a bit of a wordy question.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm not 100% sure I understand it. What?
Do you think they would sell massive brick boxes that don't necessarily build into a set?
I think that architecture set shows that they'll try it once in a while. And if you think about it, you can imagine how that might work with this idea of going after people who just want some kind of creative relaxation, people who might not already have a massive stash of Lego bricks of their own. You know, maybe you could picture how you could almost like have an adult version of a brick bucket where it's intended to appeal to people who just want to kind of get to grips with some bricks and don't want instructions. But everything we've seen recently for adults really demonstrates that, you know, all those sets have instructions. So I'll be surprised if that turns up, but it could happen, I imagine.
Okay, I think they clarified it a bit more. Do you think Lego could sell instructions without pieces for like truly gigantic sets?
Wow. That's a good question.
Yeah, that was my question. I was, because, you know, when you're building a set and you have to sell it and you have to do packaging and all that stuff, it's very expensive. But if you could use Pick a Brick, or now with the BrickLink acquisition, you could say, here's directions for something that would normally be 20,000 pieces that is more like the mocks that we show here, but that no one could ever actually sell it and make money. But if you could use your own pieces, or you could do Pick a Brick or something like that, that's something that they could do.
I bet Lego would be nervous of doing that because they'd be worried that the parts wouldn't be available. But maybe if BrickLink reached a point in the future where like Lego knew that there was an availability of parts there, maybe it's something they could do. Because that reminds me, like in the past, there's been things like where instructions have been shared online for like, if you own these 3 Technic sets or these 5 Star Wars sets, you can rebuild them into this. But I think that's the fear Lego would always have with it, is like whether the bricks were currently available, so that if they then sell the instructions, they don't want people complaining, oh no, I can't get the bricks to build that.
Right.
One of the other questions was, do you think the types of sets we see as Comic-Con exclusives will transition to 18 plus like the Bespin Duel set?
That's a really good point, actually. Personally, again, just my personal view, is I thought it was really strange that that Bespin Duel set had an 18 plus label, because yeah, it's supposed to be more of a display piece, but who's to tell children whether they display or play with their Lego set? Like, who's to tell adults whether they play or display a Lego set, you know? It's, yeah, I think that set clearly really should have just had a normal age label on. I thought the 18 plus on that felt like a little bit of a gimmick.
Another question that came up, with Lego releasing more and more expensive sets each year, do you think these sets will crowd each other out and further Lego's reputation as being too expensive? Perhaps that's the reason for the 18 plus brand?
I think that's something that this year, especially putting the presentation together, I really noticed, because one of the reasons that I was thinking about how Lego adult sets have evolved over the years was because we used to get 3 or 4 adult sets in a year, tops, you know, at one point. And then if you look at the number of releases this past year, it is so hard to keep up with. And of course, you know, it's up to us as consumers to be choosy and pick our favorites and not just want everything. But that's hard. Like, you know, we all know as Lego fans that, you know, if you put 10 nice sets in front of us, there's probably going to be 6 or 7 of them that are really appealing and we'd really love to own. And I do think there's a risk that these adult sets end up competing with each other. But I suppose what Lego is doing at the minute is just trying to sound out the market and see how many sets they can release without reaching that point.
Yeah, whereas before we'd see 3 or 4 sets a year, now we see 3 or 4 sets in a month.
Yeah.
Kind of building on one of the previous questions, and with what you talked about in the discussion, do you see smaller 18 plus sets kind of like the size of a Bespin Duel set, something smaller than the helmets taking off as an adult line? Or would you say like helmets is probably the lowest entry point?
I can't imagine them being much smaller than that, because we're at that strange point now with Lego, aren't we? Where like a $10 or $15 set is really, really small. You know, you only get so much bang for your buck. So I think helmet sets realistically is probably as small as you can go to still get that satisfying build experience. But I think what those helmet sets have shown, and what architecture's shown in the past, is that Lego are willing to experiment with the size of these things. So it would be interesting to see what does a $20 adult set look like? What does a $40 adult set look like? And, you know, would we want to buy them? Like, I imagine if they were good enough and justified the price, it could work. And yeah, like I said, what Lego has shown in recent years is that they're willing to experiment with different things and willing to try things, see whether they work out or not. So I think it's definitely a possibility.
Great. Another question from the chat. Bricklink had a great crowdsourcing experiment. Do you think Lego will continue with that, where they don't produce sets until there's commitments for purchasing?
Well, that was a real surprise, wasn't it, when it came up? And surely it's not a coincidence that Lego did that experiment and then acquired BrickLink the following year. And BrickLink just seems like that whole scheme worked out so well, right? The way that people were able to upload their marks and the way that they were able to be sold and how quickly they sold and how many of them sold. So it seems to me that it would be a fun thing to do again. Because again, if you look at the A-fold designer sets, they were sets that you wouldn't get any other way. Like, they're very unlikely that those specific sets would be released as big, wide, you know, typical Lego sets. So yeah, it feels like there's definitely scope there.
Here's another question. Given the demand for increased adult sets, do you think they'll be increasing the number of Lego Ideas sets that are selected in the future?
Well, I don't know about everyone else, but it definitely seemed like it was going that way, because I think the review that had like Seinfeld in, there were 2 or 3 sets that came out of that one. And there's often been 2 or 3 sets out of the review periods. But then we had this massive review with 26 projects in, and only 1 set came out of it. So this is always the drawback, I think, with trying to predict trends, is you think, oh, this is definitely a trend. There was 1 set, then this year there were 2 sets, that, you know, it's definitely going up. And then it all gets blown out of the water when, you know, the Globe is the only set that gets announced out of a 26 product review. So who knows? I hope so, because I think Lego often refer to ideas as like the hit singles, because it's so varied. It's like a line of hit single records. And I think that's what's so great about it. We get to see all different manner of sets within it. And as far as I'm concerned with ideas, the more the better, really.
I love that way of putting it, as like the hit singles.
Real quick, I want to just jump in here and say we have a 5-minute warning.
Great. Do you think we will hit a set that is over $8,000 US soon?
8,000 or 800?
1,000.
Oh, 1,000.
Do you think we'll hit that point?
Well, so this is how naive I am, right? When the original UCS Millennium Falcon came out, a friend and I were talking about it, and we were saying, like, is this one that people will be reselling? Is this one that people will be stashing away, waiting for it to go up in value? And we concluded there's no way, because how could it increase in value from how expensive it already is? Surely this can't go up in price on the secondary market because it already costs so much. And then obviously we all know what happened with that. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we end up with a $1,000 Lego set, because, you know, the prices are only going in one direction. You know, as long as we're willing to buy these beautiful, enormous detailed models, it seems Lego are more than happy to push the limits and see what they can do. Yeah, thanks ever so much, everyone, for watching. Yeah, it's been great fun talking to everyone, and yeah, it's been a blast, as has the rest of BrickCon. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone.